God aften og velkommen til dette webinar. I dag skal vi høre fra Julian og Claire, som gerne vil snakke lidt om 3P og de 3 principper omkring det at enten have et handicap, eller være pårørende til en, der har et handicap. Og så skal jeg jo starte med at sige de her ord, som vi plejer at sige. 3P.dk er en non-profit organisation, som har til formål at udbrede forståelsen af de 3 principper. Forståelsen af de 3 principper er en forståelse af, hvordan vi fungerer som mennesker, som spreder sig over hele verden, og som har hjulpet mennesker verden over med at komme sig helt af stress, angst, misbrug, depression, samt finde vej tilbage til klarhed, ro, mentalt overskud og livsglæde. I 3P.dk ønsker vi at invitere alle interesserede med ind i samtalen og et nyt perspektiv på mental sundhed og det gode liv, som vi alle har oplevet, efter vi har mødt forståelsen af principperne. Du kan se mere på vores hjemmeside 3pdk.org og i Facebook-gruppen 3pdk, de 3 principper i Danmark. Og aftens webinar foregår på engelsk, men hvis man har et spørgsmål, så er man som altid velkommen til at række hånden op, eller man kan gå ind i chatten, og så kan man skrive på dansk, og så skal jeg forsøge at oversætte. And then I'll switch to another speaker view, and then I'll let Julian and or Claire take over. Welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Charles. Hello, everyone. My name is Julian Fraser, and as Charles has just introduced, we are from the Almond Tree Foundation, myself and Claire Schutz, and we're going to be doing a webinar. This webinar today is called Looking Beyond Physical Diagnosis. Is it possible to have well-being when facing disability or illness? Now, I'm sure that introduction was done very nicely in Danish, but unfortunately, I'm not fluent, so I just wanted to make sure. We're from the Almond Tree Foundation, and the Almond Tree Foundation is a, as Charles said, it's a non-profit organization, and it's part of the story as to how and why Claire and I are working together. So I'm just going to do a little bit of introduction into that. So my name, as I said, is Julian Fraser, and I've been friends with Claire for something like 15 years, I think, something like that, 14 or 15 years. We came in contact to each other through the 3 principles, and through many conversations with Claire, it became very apparent that in my experiences in the world with my daughter, and I'll come to her in a minute, that there was a very great need for people who might be struggling with disability and illness, specifically parents who are carers for disabled or sick children. As this was a group that I have personal experience of, and Claire, as she'll explain in her story, she has a disability, and so she is also very familiar with this kind of stress, anxiety, and fear around it. So the Almond Tree Foundation is an organization that tries to help carers find their well-being through the 3 principles. Where I want to tell a little bit of introduction as to how that came about from my perspective, because my own personal story very much resonates with the idea of parents who are struggling. And the story I'm about to tell, just a little bit of a warning, it might be a bit traumatic, so just be aware of that. Actually, I just remembered I wanted to just show a little video, as it were. So I'm sorry it's not so slick, but here it is, as it were. So sorry about this. A bit nervous. So my daughter was born 21 years ago. She wasn't breathing when she appeared into the world, and it was totally unexpected. The birth was effectively very, planned and quite normal. It was an induction, but unbeknownst to us, she was in real trouble. And when she emerged, she wasn't breathing for something like 10 minutes. And as you can see, she's a very enjoyable and beautiful 21-year-old who's very capable in her own way, but her life is severely impacted. Now, as a result of that, that traumatic birth, she had a birth injury, which effectively is known as cerebral palsy. She suffered an oxygen at birth. She wasn't breathing for 10 minutes. And when that happened, as it were, as she emerged, we were totally unaware of that. And so in that moment, as it were, we felt massive elation that she was alive and in the world, but instantly everything was shaken upside down in that she wasn't moving, and this was a significant issue, and so as a result, it became very difficult to deal with. Now, after those first 10 minutes, when she did start breathing, she was taken to the intensive care unit, and very soon after that, within 24 hours, she was diagnosed as having this, brain damage, and her life was going to be impacted. And that created for me a great deal of insecurity about what the future was going to be, a great deal of fear about how her life was going to turn out, and whether or not we as a family could handle it, and what she was going to be capable of, what she wasn't going to be capable of. I had a lot of unanswered questions. And as a result, it became very difficult. And I'm not just talking for me, but also my wife as well. Now, I guess what happened next was, and again, this is a demonstration of what we know are the principles in action, let's say, this understanding in action, in that I realized I could see that I was getting upset. I could see that I was getting anxious, scared, and I had lots of negative feelings, and which were very painful. And I didn't know what to do about them. I didn't have any answers for them. The doctors didn't have any answers for me, because it's all what will happen, not what's happening right now. And the only thing I could see was when I was thinking about the future, when I was thinking about what her capabilities were, when I was thinking about anything to do with what might happen at some point in the future, I was becoming distressed. And when I wasn't thinking about that, so I was okay, and she was fine. She was a baby. Babies can't really do very much under, as you may know, within the first few months of their life. They're very, they're pretty much reliant on everything for us. So I could see that by thinking about what might happen, I was getting distressed. And as a result, I kind of resolved to myself, well, do your best not to think about that. Don't think about that, and let whatever will be will be. And that carried me, that feeling and that understanding carried me to a better, more productive state of mind. And having realized that, I explained to my wife that as well, and she took her time, as it were. It wasn't like, I had to explain to her what I was going through, but she also managed to see that as well. And as a result, the journey of our family, because we had another child as well then, she's our second child, I have 5 children, became much easier to navigate. Now, having gone through that, all the groups and all the other parents that they come across, everyone has a similar but different, very different set of circumstances and story. And so as a result, when discussing with Claire these ideas, we came across the idea of forming the armoury to help parents or anyone who is sick or disabled with the principles using this understanding. So that's my little introduction to the armoury and me and my story, as it were. So I'm now going to hand you over to Claire. And hello, Claire. Do you want to do an introduction as well?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Lovely to see you. I can see some of you are outside having tea and relaxing, and lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Julian. That such a wonderful introduction. The only thing that I would add to the almond tree from my perspective is that what's been really wonderful is that it's a global community. And we've created a space where people can just come and share whatever is going on for them without any judgment. And that in itself, as well as teaching and understanding of the principles, those two things together have been a very, very powerful thing. And it's so kind of heartwarming. It's a completely free, it's a non-profit based, Julian and I have never taken any money from it. But it's a labor of love, and we kind of really enjoy being able to have the impact that we do with it. And we just signed a kind of a partnership agreement with the biggest disability charity in the UK, which is really exciting. So that's really wonderful. And as Julian said, we met a number of years ago. We both did Aaron Turner's One Thought's very first practitioner course together. A very long time. And and as you said, we've been talking about doing something for ages, and then finally the stars aligned, and we created the almond tree, and and we continue. It's evolving slowly, but it is surely growing, and really just very, very heartwarming. I encourage you to if you have the time or the inclination, to go and look at some of the stories. We've got a really great thing called Stories of Hope on there, which is people just telling their story of what they've found useful with an understanding of the principles and how it's transformed their experience. So my personal experience is that I have cerebral palsy. I live in London. I'm in my late 50s. I'm married. I have a husband, and I have a 23-year-old daughter. And very, very lucky. I have an incredibly blessed life. And nowadays I'm a master transformative coach, whatever that means. But before that, I spent a number of years making documentary programs and for various different TV channels in the UK. And when I was born, attitudes towards disability were very different from how they are today. So when they realized that I had cerebral palsy, the specialist said to my mum, put her in a home and have another child. And I'm extremely glad that she didn't take that advice. My mother decided that she was going to take a different path. She decided that she was going to take me home. I have an older sister who's 3 years older, and that she was just going to treat me like any other child, and didn't put any limitations on what was possible for me. And that has been very helpful to me throughout my life. And the journey that I've had has been varied. When I was a child, I was very protected and lived in this kind of bubble where I didn't really realize I was disabled. And then in my early, when I was about 12 years old, I remember it was the first time that I went out on my own. And I suddenly realized that I was different. And I suddenly realized that maybe the world wasn't going to be the most hospitable place for me. And it was really, really tough, really, really tough. And I spent some time thinking that I couldn't cope, that it was beyond me, that if that was the life I had to live, I wasn't sure that I wanted to live it. And I kind of, as you can hear, was feeling really sorry for myself. But then something really amazing happened, which was I would now know, and I would now, from what I've learned from the three principles, I would now call it an insight. But basically, it suddenly occurred to me that there were two paths, and that I had a choice to make. That I could either sit in the corner and feel sorry for myself and be essentially a victim for most of my life, or I could do the best I could with what I had. And I decided, being me, that being a victim didn't sound very interesting. It sounded like it might be fun for a bit, but then it could become quite tedious. So I decided to essentially get over my thinking and get over myself and go out into the world and do the best that I can. And as I said before, I've had amazing experiences in my life. I've done so many things that people said weren't possible. And yeah, I've been very, very lucky. So, and often I talk about my cerebral palsy as a gift. And some people find that quite hard. A lot of people have taken me to task for that, but this is just how I see it. And so therefore, because we experience what we think, and my thinking is that it's a gift, I don't feel angry or frustrated. Sometimes I get frustrated, but I don't, I see it as basically, it's been my biggest tool for spiritual growth throughout my life in many different forms. And when I was younger, went traveling around the world, in fact, to meet people in different spiritual traditions and healing traditions, and had amazing experiences because of my openness and because of their eagerness to try and heal me, so to speak. I've never really wanted to be healed because I really do believe that I'm perfect. Like the body that I inhabit is perfect for me, for the lessons I need to learn. And again, that's something that people often find quite hard to accept, but it's my truth, and I can only come from my reality on this. And so, as well as it being my biggest tool for spiritual growth, what else has happened is that it's taught me how resilient I am. I mean, I know, like beyond thought, it's almost, sorry to use this word again, but it's almost like a spiritual fact for me that we are, as human beings, innately resilient. And what I mean by that is that we have the capacity to adapt. We are hugely adaptable. I have overcome things in my life that I just didn't think was possible. And I'm sure probably if you reflect back on your life, you would find that there were instances of that and what's possible. So, and also another thing, and the final thing I kind of want to say is that I'm really aware that I'm more than just my body. My body is what carries me through life, but it isn't the totality of my being. It isn't my essence. And sometimes people forget that I'm disabled. And people will say to me, friends I've had for a long time, or if I'm sitting down for a while and people don't see me walking, they will say to me that they forget I'm disabled. And I think that's because I don't think of myself as being disabled. I know I have a disability. I'm not denying that, but I don't think of myself as being disabled. So I don't know if any of you have heard anything that resonates with you, but I think what we're talking about, we're talking about it in relationship to disability on this particular webinar, but actually it has a resonance for a universal experience. So, Julian, is there anything you'd like to add?
I agree with you, and I think I also I mean we share a philosophy in this, in that we are more than the totality of our bodies. That's absolutely true, and I know that not just for my daughter, but also for me as well. Like, there is there is something more profound in us that is more than just how we look or our physical capabilities, and that we are perfect in spite of whatever physical limitations we have. So yeah, I love that, Claire. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that.
And essentially, you know, from a Three Principles understanding, you know, from the work from our work in the almond tree, I would say that it's very clear to both of us that it's very common to have feelings of grief, loss, and fear, and to feel overwhelmed and anxious and very fearful about the future, and to feel isolated when facing illness or disability, especially if it's a recent diagnosis. However, from a Three Principles perspective, when people are struggling in that way, we know that it's because of their thinking. And we know that people live in the feeling of their thinking. And we know that when people get an understanding of the Three Principles or how we operate psychologically, it's profoundly helpful. So that's what we do. Everything that we do is based on that, because we know that our innate nature is resilience and well-being. It's not something that needs to be learned, or, you know, it's just something that's there, and is at times when we get caught up in an unhelpful state of mind, or when we get caught up in thinking that appears real, that can obscure it. That's true, but it's never, you know, it's always, there's a kind of true north that you can point people to. And what I really love about teaching the principles, and I don't know if anyone else on this call does teach the principles, what I really love about it is that I'm not teaching people anything. I'm really, really reminding them of what is already within. What is already within. And Julian was going to give a very brief explanation of the principles in a very simple way, in case there was anyone on the call who didn't know.
Well, I wanted to say something else first, Claire.
Yeah,
and I know you kind of touched on this as well, but it is true. We come across many people in the almond tree who are in this situation or similar situations to this, and many of them, many of them are struggling. In fact, I would say that partially the impetus to begin the almond tree, I don't know if you remember this, Claire, was that I had a series of experiences of meeting parents who were really struggling with their perspective of bringing up their children. And I don't mean necessarily, you know, sometimes it can be very physically difficult. Again, I don't want to try and say, well, even within that, there are psychological elements to it. But it was, as we would say, the thought of what, you know, of having this in their life, the loneliness that they feel because they feel they're isolated from other family and friends because they can't enjoy themselves. And again, I don't mean this in a judgmental way. You know, because my daughter is involved with various groups with other families who are disabled in our community. So I meet many parents who are really struggling with it, who are really struggling with having to parent a child in a situation that they weren't expecting. That the change to their life became very, very different, and having had that background, as Claire said, we met, on Erin Turner's program, having had the background in the principles and come to this understanding and sort of see life from that perspective, to listen to parents discussing this and talking about their difficulties, it became so obvious to try and help them understand that that it is their perception of what's going on, their thinking about what's going on, that is creating their pain. In the story that I said earlier, I could see that it was my thinking that was creating that pain, that 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 and it was very real, that pain, and it always is. But I could see that it was coming from thought. I didn't yet quite see the breadth of how our thinking creates our entire experience. It only looked to me that it was creating the idea of what's going to happen in the future with my daughter. What the principles offer us is the understanding that our thinking is creating our entire experience from moment to moment through our senses. And we buy into that and take that very seriously. We are unwitting participants in making that the reality that it is. Through mind, thought, and consciousness that brings that all alive and makes it very real, we are living that experience of our thinking in real time. And in these kind of circumstances, very often it is immense pain and helplessness and fear and grief. I've heard it said more than once. I'm not going to say many, but I've heard it said several times that parents feel like they are grieving for the child that they didn't have. People feel they have lost something, and that they have to go through this and again, I don't mean that in a, how can I say this? Like, I don't judge anyone for experiencing life that they are experiencing it. And I understand that everyone has their own experience. I don't want to denigrate anyone's personal experience of life the way that they choose to have it. But for me, it looks very different. As Claire was saying earlier, her cerebral palsy is something that has helped her grow. And I would say the same with my daughter. Like, initially I could see, again, through my thinking, that this was, it looked like a punishment. It looked like I was being punished by God, for something. But there was something that I needed to, and we needed to experience as a negative in our life. And then, having seen that this was created by thought, I was able to see it very differently and experience it as a blessing, as something that helps all of us, not just my daughter, but all of us around her and her community and, family and friends, that this is something that we can all benefit from. And as Claire was saying, she's grown up, as it were, not considering that she has that disability. And I would say that we have brought my daughter up in the same way. We want her to have as normal a life as possible. Now, she has obvious limitations to that, but all my kids treat her as they do each other. Like, she doesn't get any benefit as a result of her disability in our house, in certain circumstances. Obviously, she can't, let's say, for example, she can't bring in the shopping in the same way that everyone else can bring in the shopping. But if she's being an obstinate, annoying sister, she gets it just the same as the other annoying, obstinate children in our house. Because that's the healthiest way that we can see to live as a family. That this isn't a problem. It's a blessing. Sorry, I know I've gone off track in terms of explaining the principles there, Claire. Anyway,
no, so beautifully, I think you've done a beautiful job.
So I guess what I'm saying is, and this is a nice way of putting it, that the fear of what is going to happen isn't required. It's not required. That a better experience for all of us is always available and is possible. And it's always possible to find a different feeling. I guess I gave the example for that in terms of how I saw my daughter initially. So this deeper feeling is available. You've just got to put yourself out there to look for it. be open to that.
Can I just say something more about a deeper feeling? So just to kind of clarify a little bit more what we're talking about, feelings like hope and gratitude are examples of a deeper feeling. They open your mind. They help to open your mind. When someone is in a hopeful state of mind, they have more perspective. There is more space for the new. They are more receptive, I would say. So it's a more receptive place. But also for a lot of people, when they're facing situations which they're finding challenging, hope is something that will float them. It will help them to navigate what's going on at that time. Whereas fear or anxiety are the opposite of that. They kind of close down our experience, and our experience becomes very kind of circular and repetitive. And so looking for a deeper feeling is a really wonderful direction. And the more you kind of orientate towards that, the more your experience will move towards that, because feeling follows thought. So, and there are times when things happen to me with my walking nowadays, when I maybe I've been losing mobility recently, although apparently I was told the other day, for somebody with my diagnosis and of my age, I'm doing very well. But for me, it doesn't necessarily feel like that. And not that it feels bad, but I know I am losing mobility. And it's so interesting to watch how I feel about that, depending on how I'm thinking about it, depending on what I'm telling myself about how life should be, or what I'm projecting into the future of what might happen, or if I lose hope, or if I forget to all the things I have in my life to be grateful for, which are so, as I said in the beginning, are really, I'm very, very lucky in that sense. And so it's just a very, basically deeper feelings they float you, and they also give you more clarity of mind. And I don't know, do you have an example, Julian?
I do, Claire. So yeah, this is so I part of my, let's say, my life journey has been that I managed to run 3 marathons. And I was telling Claire this example earlier today. So, and I think it's a great example of being able to find a deeper feeling and how it changes your experience. So I was running a marathon, and this was my second marathon, and I got to the halfway point, 13 miles, which is about 2 hours. So you've been running for 2 hours, and I started feeling like this incredible pain in my stomach that I'd never experienced before. I didn't know what it was. And alongside that, I had tremendous feelings of hopelessness, that I was never going to finish it, that I was physically done, and that I couldn't do it anymore, and that I might as well stop. That was the voice in my head. You might as well stop. This is finished. It's over. You need to stop running now. So I told the person I was running with, he should go on, which he did. And I just sat by the roadside, just like, this is it. I can't do it anymore. And I was physically capable of doing it, but I just felt like exhausted and unable to stop. And I had this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but just like pain in my stomach that I just couldn't do it. And I was sitting there, and guess I had an insight, or I had a realization that this was what people talked about when they said they were having an anxiety attack. That I'd created, like my mind had created the entire story that I could not finish this race. And as a result, I was having physical feelings of just mass anxiety and panic about, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to finish. When really and truly, I realized that there was nothing wrong with me. Like nothing hurt, nothing, no, my legs didn't hurt. I hadn't pulled a muscle. I wasn't feeling sick. I just had this tremendous feeling, like almost a knowing of just like, this is a waste of time. You're never going to do this. And so with that kind of realization, I found this understanding that actually it's just a thought, that it is it's made up, and you can just carry on and see what happens. Like I as Claire kind of said, but I just I just started running, and I could see that it was just my thinking kind of creating that experience for me. And so with that new feeling and with that new hope, I was able to finish. I was able to finish. I did actually. It passed within, a few minutes, and suddenly I couldn't. I was almost in shock. I couldn't believe it. But it did pass, and there was nothing wrong with me, and I was able to complete it. So that's that. So Claire and I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
We've been talking now for almost 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So we wanted to ask you a question, and I'm just going to share that with you now. So the question is, can you think of a time when a deeper feeling changed your experience? And we'd like some interaction.
Yeah, it'd be
We'd like
great
to hear a little bit from you. So if you have a time similar to my story or different, whatever, something where you've had a deeper feeling that has changed your experience.
Charles, has anyone put their hand up? Or
No, but maybe I can share.
please, that would be great.
So when I had all my stress and anxiety, I remember. So in Denmark we have this, what we call it, the yellow book. Basically, it's a psychologist here in Denmark who found the principles through Michael Neal, or through her husband who found them through Michael Neal, and then she wrote a book about it. It's called Your Self-Healing Mind. And when I missed my own overthinking, I stumbled upon this book, and when I read it, I had this feeling of hope. And it was, I think somebody said, the S on Superman's shirt means hope. So that superpower suddenly, coming over me, that I could see where all the suffering was coming from. Because I thought it was coming from the outside, and not that I was creating it.
That's a wonderful example. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anyone else? It becomes a lot more, it's great if it's interactive. If anyone else has an example. If not, we'll just move on, but.
If I can, there's also something else I wanted to share.
Of course.
Because we had a little pre-meeting where I mentioned that I wanted to talk why I have, created it with 3PDK, created this webinar, and why I've invited you and Julian here. And it was because I have a daughter with cerebral palsy, and she's 17 years old now. And when I saw Claire in the 3P conference in Prague, I thought, wow, that's quite powerful that somebody is pointing to the principles, somebody who has a disability. And I thought, wow, what an impact we could make in Denmark with all the organizations that are here that are for people with disabilities. And what Julian just reminded me when he told his story, when his daughter was born, I had that same experience. That, I mean, it was a perfect baby that came out, but when they told me that she had a disability, this whole imaginary thing of having a child that I have already projected around the future, the future, what it's supposed to look like, it just came, crashing down. And there's a lot of fear-based thinking. And as she grew up, and this, it was always fear around, would she have any friends? Would she get married? Would somebody love her? Would she, be normal? Or all those kinds of things. And I hadn't really thought about it for a long time until Julian mentioned it. So that was, it's fun to see how fear-based it was.
And that's what we found. That's what we find with the people that come to the almond tree. They're living in fearful thinking, and they don't know that they're creating it. So it gives them a lot of psychological freedom once they see that, to open up to a new possibility and feel something different. And I love the story that you told about how much hope you got from the yellow book, because that's all it takes. All it takes is a deeper feeling, an insight, a little bit of understanding, and then our consciousness raises and lifts, and what becomes available to us, it becomes very different. Very, very different. I think it's really important too. Also, a number of people who come to the almond tree are feeling, as you mentioned in what you just said, Charles, feeling a sense of loss, a feeling of anger, of I didn't say, Julian has written a wonderful blog on our website called "I Didn't Sign Up for This." Did I get that title right, Julian? I hope so.
I think so, yeah.
Something like that. But anyway, it's a great blog, and all about his experience with Hasia. And another thing that really helps is kind of getting behind rather than fighting what's happening. As I mentioned before, given the changes that are happening in my body, or the story I told in the very beginning, when I realized I had two different options, I could be a victim or not, essentially, getting behind what is happening, is huge, opening up to, rather than resisting it, kind of opening up to possibility. Nothing is fixed in life. Everything is continually changing, and getting a sense of what's possible beyond the kind of suffering, beyond the limitation, and if you consider the possibility of something different, your mind will automatically move in that direction. One new thought, which was essentially what happened to me, when an insight, in other words, in Tre Principles parlance, can completely transform your whole experience that you're having. And I find that, I find the way the mind works, the beauty of the system, incredibly hopeful. And so before I knew about the principles, I used to take all my scary thinking incredibly seriously, and I was like very, very good at worrying. Probably had a master's in worrying, and and it meant that I spent a lot of time in a very uncomfortable place. And now I would worry. I think I worry very, very rarely, very, very rarely, and it means that I just have so much more freedom in my life, and so much more presence, so much more openness, and open to the fact that I don't know what's going to happen, open to nothing, as I said before, we are living in the unknown all the time. I didn't say this before. I said nothing is fixed, but we're living in the unknown. actually moment by moment, all we have is this moment now. And for me, that's been incredibly helpful, because I now see, I didn't used to see worry this way. I thought worry was something to be taken very seriously, that it was data about the outside world, and that I better do something about it, and that I needed to change my external experience in order to have a different feeling. And so amazingly liberating to realize that isn't the case. And now I see worry as a low state of mind. And that is, again, incredibly helpful, because once I see it as once I understand that it's a low state of mind and not the clearest possible thinking, then I immediately, as soon as I remember that, so then I'm free of it. Then I'm free of it. So there's so much freedom and possibility in the three principles understanding.
Yeah, that's good. Did you have a lot of thinking about comparing yourself to everybody else? And how did you come around that? Because I guess that will be, something everybody does. But
yeah, I think that's part of the human condition, right? And I still do compare myself. But I know that for me, my feeling state is my guide to how seriously to take my thinking. And that's really, really profound for me, because my personal experience is that when I'm in like an unclear place, it feels really real. So I can't kind of dissect the thinking when I'm in it. That's not possible for me. But I can go, oh, okay, I'm feeling really anxious now, right now. What do I know that's telling me? That's telling me that there's something more to see here, that I'm not in the clearest place I could be, and that maybe what else is possible? Like, I love that question. I love these two questions. What more is there to see here? And what else is possible? Because for me, they just open the whole thing up massively. Julian, was there anything you wanted to add?
I love the way that you've described it there, because I think that's true as for me also, or at least I see how that's true. That as what the principles, let's say, have helped me see is not only that it's my thinking that is creating my experience, and that my well-being is all of those available, okay, but that how I'm feeling, as you've just said, is an indicator to where I'm at, where my state of mind is at, and how clear I am, and how capable I am of dealing with any situation. Now, I'm kind of, what I mean by that is that the principles, or the understanding that that's how life works, allows me to be aware of my feelings more, and being able to, I'm going to say it differently, but adjust and take a different course of action. Like, I love the way that you're saying it in terms of being open to more possibility. I like to think that I can, and I am looking in that direction. But at the very least, let's say the minimum is that I can see that I'm in an unhealthy state of mind, or that I'm in an unhealthy feeling state, and that kind of releases the pressure valve, as it were, or releases me from what looked a second ago as being incredibly serious and important to being, oh, it's not. I just need to take a step and look in a different direction, or look outside of where I'm currently looking, and find a deeper answer. And that's tremendously helpful. It's been tremendously helpful for me, that over the years. Yeah, and and I am very grateful for that, because that's changed my life. Not just in, kind of dealing with circumstances, unexpected circumstances like my daughter, but also in terms of just my the general way that I present in life. I used to take things very seriously, very my thinking about life very seriously, and being able to see that your feelings and thoughts about life are that initial perspective allows you to kind of look deeper and consider other possibilities and keep looking for other possibilities, which enables you to move in different directions, in healthier directions. And I love that.
We were in the spirit of making it interactive again. We had another question that we wanted to put to you guys, which is, and we'd love to hear examples. Have you had an insight or a new thought that's changed your experience?
We'd love to hear from you. I think that's the important thing. We would love to hear about your insights and your new thinking that has changed your experience. I realize that the style of let's say many principles-based webinars is just to sit and listen and look for new thought. And we would love to hear from you in terms of just like Charles did, just hearing from you about your life experience and how insight and new thinking has changed your experience. I can give plenty of stories, but it would be great to hear some from your life.
Is anyone on the call living with disability or illness? Does anyone have any personal experience of what we're talking about?
Again, if you don't feel comfortable with coming on screen, you can always write it in the chat as well. So we'd be happy to speak it from the chat as well. And if you don't speak English, that's also fine. I'm sure Charles can help us with that.
Can translate, yeah.
We did just come back from the summer break, so when you come back to work after 3 weeks vacation, you're not really in the mood, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I can give another example. Oh, someone's raised their hand.
Great.
Sorry.
Woohoo! The other day we did a webinar and there were so many people interacting that we ran out of time. So it depends. But thank you. Thank you for putting your hand up. Love to hear from you. Oh, 2 people. Wonderful. Thank you.
Troels, du bliver nødt til at hjælpe mig lidt.
Yes.
Jeg ved ikke, hvad slidgigt det hedder på engelsk.
Arthritis.
Okay.
Okay. I have pain all the time, and last summer I read a book. It's written by Hannah Studley, I suppose.
Oh, Hannah.
Hannah.
Yeah.
And I know that the book is not the thing that's helping me, but all the stories that was in that book about other people who had pain all the time and had moved on and was had a better time now. It also gave me a lot of hope. So now I also sometimes forget that I have pain. If I'm doing something nice or I'm in a good mood, then I can forget it. And when it comes back, I can think that it's my brain that make it, because 2 minutes ago it wasn't there. So it gives me a lot of hope. But it also gives me a lot of hope today, Claire, the thing you said about being offer. And I think I often put myself in that role. So now I I will also think that I have a choice.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. That's wonderful. And Hannah would be thrilled. We're really thrilled to hear that. Yeah, Hannah's amazing. Hannah Studley.
Okay. The next person, hello, AKG.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Anita.
Hi.
Hi, Anita.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you.
Well, it's kind of like the other way around. I'm watching the Olympics right now, and after I've learned about the 3P, sport doesn't mean that much to me anymore. So it brought me back in thought because a couple of years ago I had an accident and I had to go to a physical therapy and work out in this time space. There was some people from this community with disabilities. They came at the same time. At that time, I was so appreciated about working out with them because we had the best time ever. And I would just say, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have made it.
Wow.
Every time I went to the gym, we laughed, we cried, we went through the emotions and everything. And I know I was so thankful back then. And now watching the Olympics after learning about 3P, I know now, and I just started thinking about it yesterday. I know now that I was in the best environment when I had to work out. And yeah, so it's kind of like the other way around. I don't know if I would be just as thankful working out with athletes or anyone, but I know I wouldn't change it. So yeah, thank you for everybody. I don't have a kid or anyone who has a that thing, but I just wanted to say thank you for making the world more beautiful. And I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for the diversity. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's beautiful. Thank you. And I wanted to pick up on two things, which is the almond tree isn't just for parents. It is for people living with disability and illness as well. Although we've spoken a lot about the parents today, the community is actually quite varied. And what I loved about I don't know what you heard, Julian. I mean, it'd be interested to hear what you heard and what was just shared. But what I heard was that you were in a really hopeful, fun, positive environment when you were working out with other people who had limitations but weren't seeing those as limitations or were seeing beyond them. And the fun is another deeper feeling. It's another feeling that lifts and causes buoyancy and possibility. And so you rather than if you trained with a whole lot of athletes, you might have been thinking, gosh, look what I can't do, and look what they can do and I can't do. And then you might have gone down that kind of thought train, and then your spirits would have lowered and you might have given up and felt bad. But whereas with the other people that you trained with, there was a camaraderie and there was a feeling of hopefulness and there was fun and there was like, okay, let's see what we can do here. That's what I heard in your story. So it's again, it is an example in my world about your thinking, and also about collective communities. Because one of the things that's so wonderful about the almond tree is that people get on webinars with us, and sometimes they say things that they've never said before in public, that sometimes they feel guilty even thinking, right? And other people will go, oh, yes, me too, I feel that too. And then they'll be like, oh, really? And then you can literally physically see them kind of a weight kind of lift as they realize that it's okay. It's okay. And so there's a great kind of, I'm a big advocate of community. I'm a big advocate of the power of the collective experience, and so and both Julian and I, and so that's why we're encouraging you guys to get interactive on this webinar, because it just gives so much more depth and to the whole thing. So thank you, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I like that as well. I mean, because what I heard was very similar. I mean, I guess it's just different words to describe the same thing, but it's the energy from the people that you were with, that, let's say, that love and connection and that positivity. It sounded very much like you were in the moment, as it were. You weren't thinking about, how's this going to end up? Where's this going to be? That you were just engaged in the activity with, in a positive, as Claire's saying, in a positive community, in a where the energy is infectious. That a deeper feeling that we're speaking about that's a manifestation of that. That energy, that connection, that love carried you. And yes, of course, the physical therapy, as it were, was what needed to be done, but that, I don't know, sorry, I just hit the table. That positivity and that energy is really what made, it's what made a massive difference. And I can hear, I'll give you an example of the alternative. So about 9 months after my daughter was born, maybe a bit longer, maybe about a year, we found out that we were expecting another child, and we still weren't sure what had happened and what had caused that issue. And so we went to see the head of obstetrics at the hospital, and he looked at all the papers, and he was looking through the file, and he's like, well, there's nothing here that I can see would be any problem why you couldn't have another child. Just don't have a natural birth, have a cesarean, have an elective cesarean, because we don't know what it was. And I said to him, I said, there was a moment about an hour before the birth where my wife's heart rate dropped massively. And you're saying everything is fine. Like, surely that was something that might have caused this. And he then looked quite guilty, and he went, oh, flipping over the page to where he'd kind of had it already laid out. He said, oh, you mean this? Oh, that's fine. And the energy around that was very, both my wife and I left there, and I was kind of, did you feel the same thing that I felt? Like we both felt like he was, he'd kind of tried to hide that, and that he wasn't being very clear and honest with us, and that he hadn't been. I don't want to keep saying that same word, but he hadn't been as clear with us as he should have been. And the energy that he came with was also very suspect. Like, he felt like he was trying to defend what happened. And we both started getting upset because of that. That's, maybe, your mind start playing tricks on you, and, who knows, what had happened? Why did it happen? Why didn't he say anything? Why was he, and it took a moment, but we both saw that we were living in the thinking of what had happened and not looking towards the deeper possibilities of just the life that we were in. Let's put it like that, of the situation that we were in. It didn't matter that he had, done something that wasn't so positive. And we weren't going to get drawn into that pit of negative feeling and thinking about it. And instead, as we kind of keep saying, that we were living and we wanted to live in a deeper and more enjoyable state of mind. And so we both kind of sort of left it. We just sort of said, let's not get into it. It doesn't do anything. The result is still the same. We're still going to have another child, and now we know not to have it naturally. We're going to have a cesarean. And whatever he did, whatever it was, we were able to get past, and we'll just leave that as it was. And thank goodness, that made a big difference to both of us, because we both kind of we changed our perspective, as it were, through that deeper understanding. But that's an example of how that, you know, the I guess I don't want to say that, the energy around it kind of makes a difference. You know, we felt like he was doing something that wasn't helpful. We got sucked into it, and we were able to kind of see a way out of it. Anyway, I hope that's helpful.
Love that, because what I heard in that was that you and Joe decided you just didn't want to live in that feeling. That the feeling of fear and uncertainty and all that kind of, you didn't want to stay there. You could see that it wasn't helpful, which is part of what we're kind of pointing to. And I also wanted to talk about something that I touched on this earlier as well, but it's really been an important thing for me, which is that I don't see, like, my disability, my cerebral palsy is part of me, like, but it's not, when I kind of say the totality of my being, which is a kind of sorry, quite a highfalutin way of kind of saying I see myself as a spiritual being, and that there's so much more to me than what's going on with my body. And when there's a really lovely, on the Almond Tree website, there's a really lovely interview that we did a while ago with Elsie Spittle. And I hope most of you know who she is, because she's really amazing, retired sadly now, but really amazing woman. And she was talking on that about her grandchild, actually, who happened to have cerebral palsy. And she was talking about the difference it made to her whole experience and the way in which they interacted when she looked beyond the physical. She looked to his soul, and she spoke to that, and she interacted with that. And, you know, despite anything that may be going on with my body, I know that I'm still whole and that I cannot be broken, that I am spiritually unbreakable. And the reason I mention that is that it's been, that kind of knowledge has been profoundly helpful to me in remembering and accessing my well-being, even in the most difficult times. Because for me, well, I don't, but I just have to imagine. But I imagine if I did identify with what was going on in my body and that only, I would have a very, very different experience. And so I hope, I'm sorry, it's always more challenging for me when I talk about things that are more ethereal or spiritual. And I hope people are getting a sense of what I'm trying to convey. But essentially, I really believe that I'm perfect the way I am. So does any, oh, sorry, Julian.
I think I was going to ask the same thing that you were going to ask her, which is, before we wrap up, does anyone have any questions? Is that what you were going to ask her?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions on anything that we've said or any of the points that we've raised, we'd love to hear from you.
Did anybody hear anything new?
I don't know if you can see the chat, but it just says beautiful stories and beautiful sharing.
Ah, someone's put their hand up.
I was just trying to unmute myself. Sorry, I get the hand off. I'm on the phone, and it's very difficult on this phone to do that. I just thought that I'm a mother of 2 children, 17 and 15, and they both got autism, and one of them ADHD, and a lot of motor skill problems and sleep deprived. And the other one's got autism, and she's got morbus I don't know what it's called in English. It's something. It's about the same in English, I think. It's a stomach disease where the immune system attack your own stomach. Well, though that's my children, but I've actually never as such had a problem with them with their difficulties. What I found very difficult to deal with is all the things around it. And I mean, like school, doctor, dealing with all the things around it. And like now I've got about 10, 15, maybe 15 mails or messages from doctors, schools that I haven't answered yet. So it's more like, I think my question is how to deal with all the things around it. Not as much because you must meet that a lot with the parents that you deal with. That is not as much the children, but everything around it. Do you have any experience or ideas of what to do about it? Is that also just thoughts, or what?
I think that's a great question. Thank you very much. I didn't mention my son yet, but one of my son that was born, I kind of mentioned after my daughter. So he also has autism and some personality type issues. He's got autism, ADHD as well, and so interestingly enough, he's kind of how can I put it? Like he's also come up with a different set of issues, right? Some of which actually become more complex to deal with physically than my daughter. But the idea of that you brought up, which is kind of issues around it of schooling, nurses, therapy, all of that. We have people, in our groups who talk about being overwhelmed, just there's too much to do. Not when does it stop, but like you can only deal with so much before you just feel like it's overwhelming. And that feeling of overwhelm then can lead to feeling guilty about not doing enough to help them. And am I a good parent? All those kind of things. And I guess I'm talking for myself as much as them when I say that you also feel that as well, because it can sometimes feel endless. And, so I can definitely relate to everything that you've expressed and more. And I guess my way of understanding and dealing with that is that I can only do not, and I don't mean this in a negative way, as like, oh, shame, I can only do so much, but I am confident and happy with being able to accomplish and achieve what I can achieve. My best is my best. And I don't feel, and I shouldn't feel ashamed for that, or sad about that, or that I'm neglecting my child as that, because everyone's trying to do their best. So you're trying to do your best. Your children are trying to do their best. The schools are trying to do their best. And the therapists are trying to do their best as well. And the doctors as well. And, there's going to be times that you're not going to be able to deal with everything. And you're not going to be able to on top of everything. And again, I don't mean this in a negative way. I'm not saying, and that's okay. Like, oh, it is more than good enough. Yeah. It's great. Because again, even if you replied to every email, even if you dealt with everything, even if you were on top of all the therapists, it still wouldn't mean that everything was, happening as it should, and all the issues were going to be resolved. That life doesn't work like that. You do everything you can do, and that's good. It's fine. It's how it's meant to be. It's perfect, and good for you. That's normal.
It's normal.
It is.
I would say we come across a lot of guilt, don't we, Julian? A lot of people being very guilty about not being able to do enough. And guilt is a thought.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just like fear.
Yeah.
It's not necessary to feel guilty. It's not required.
It's never ending. The thinking of what you can achieve and what you can't. I used to tell this to people in work. Like, I've worked for a non-profit, totally different field, but the same thing, right? You will feel overwhelmed if you think you can deal with everything. You can't. It's a feeling. You have to be comfortable with your feeling and thinking about whatever circumstances you're in, and be confident and happy that you're always doing your best. Everyone's doing their best, even your child.
Yeah.
And as Claire said, that's
your question. Did we answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Both that you're always doing your best, and I really like this. You said, Claire, about I can't remember it right now, where you said, "Oh, it's all thoughts. It's a thought." I said, yeah, it is. The guilt, feeling guilty, and
Guilt is such a pernicious thought.
Yeah.
It kind of, it really
it does. Yeah, I was actually saying
but it's still a
thought. Yeah.
And it's not required, and also it's not helpful because it lowers your mind. So therefore, it lowers your clarity and your perspective, and you become less open to new ideas and possibility.
It was just a thought. A thought in the middle of I was listening to you. Oh, I had this email from my son's new school I ought to have a look at, and I want to listen to this. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very.
That was great. Thank you.
We've got time for one more question, I think, probably, if there's one out there. Or one more, something someone's heard that's resonated with them. Either. Okay, so maybe it's time to wrap up. We wanted to kind of draw everything we've said together, because we've made quite a few different points, and so we thought it might be helpful to kind of summarize.
Yeah. So I'll just bring that up.
Great. So I'll start with the first one. So we began by kind of pointing to the fact that well-being is part of our nature. It's innate. We have the innate capacity to thrive in difficult situations. We are resilient, and we can find a way through. It's something that can be relied upon. It's not something that needs to be learned, or, you know, it's an innate capacity.
Yeah. And we moved into how you're thinking, how thought creates our experience, and how that varies on our state of mind. So how we're feeling affects the quality of our thinking, and how we can in turn deal with, you know, what's going on around us. And we gave some examples of that, and, you know, as we just heard just there, the last comment as well, that was another great example of that, how our thinking creates our experience.
Yeah. And that looking for a deeper feeling, for example, hope or gratitude, we talked about those, and moving in that direction and looking in that direction is a very, very powerful thing. And also being open to new possibilities. Like, for me, I said the question, like asking the question, what else is possible, or what more is there to see in this? I find that really helpful, and it always opens up my perspective and allows me to see something fresh. And in my experience, it's fresh thinking or insight that transforms my experience.
And finally, and we've said this kind of throughout, how our essential nature is beyond illness or disability or difficult circumstances or our physical being, that we are more than just our bodies and the circumstances that we're living in. And realizing that and seeing that allows us to live a deeper, more connected and more positive experience in life, just being more alive and being more aware, and being more connected to deeper possibilities. Anything else to add, Claire?
No, I don't think so, except thank you to everyone who's stayed with us and been here.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed meeting us. It's been really lovely to meet you all.
I wanted to say one thing, and I hope this is okay, Charles. But if we've had some today from people who, you know, have talked about their own circumstances, and if you're interested in joining our community, our web address is thealmondtree.org. You know, we'd love to see you at one of our groups, or, you know, enjoy the videos that we've spoken about as well. It'd be great to see you.
Yeah, it's all completely free to access. So
yeah. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
I'll stop the recording.